So we're going to, so I'm going to do the intro and then hand over.
Okay.
Hi guys, welcome to part 3 of the AWCA Career Liftoff. The aim of this Career Liftoff series is just to provide various career paths that are available for CAs. To start off, let me introduce myself. My name is Phumelele Ngubane. I'm a qualified CA and I'll be facilitating today's session. With me is Nonsindiso Kuzwayo, who will we are going to be tagging along and doing today's session. Just a few admin stuff, guys. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Don't be shy. Don't think it's a silly question or whatever. You can ask anything. Just a bit about myself. As I've mentioned, I'm a CA and I'm also a member of the AWCA Professional Development Subcommittee. And today we're talking all things career. Just to give you a bit of background with regards to AWCA, we have a 3-tier strategy, which is nurture, identify, and lead. And our portfolio provides end-to-end support for trainees during their article years. So as I mentioned today, we're going to talk all things career. And to start off our session, we are going to speak to Imtiyaaz Abdul-Gaffur, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, as well as Nancy. So I'd like to hand over to Nonsindiso.
Hello everyone, my name is Nonsindiso Kuzwayo, as Phumelele has said. I am currently a second-year trainee at one of the Big 4 firms in Durban. So basically, I'm just going to be asking the questions that I think that you guys would be interested in. So our first speaker today is Mr. Imtiyaaz Abdul-Gaffur, and he is currently the Chief of Staff to the CEO of FNB for the rest of Africa. Hello, Mr. Imtiyaaz.
Hi, Nancy. Good evening.
Hello,
how are you?
Good, thanks, and you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good. Thank you for joining us. So please just tell us a little bit about yourself and also just a little bit about your role as the Chief of Staff to the CEO, sorry. So many of us are interested in the financial services sector, myself included, but we don't really know how our skills and experiences as CAs factors into the industry and what a CA in that particular industry does exactly.
Okay, cool. Thank you once again, Nonsindiso. So I'd first like to start off by saying a very big thank you to AWCA for having me this evening and for all of our participants who are joining us virtually via Zoom. I think with all of us who are working from home or studying from home, it's definitely a blessing that we're able to connect, and we hope that load shedding doesn't strike during this call. But so I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my journey this afternoon, or this evening rather, as the sun begins to set in Johannesburg, where I'm calling you from. I'm going to give you a bit of a synopsis in terms of how my journey came up to the point where I am now, and what I do in my current role, some of the opportunities, Nonsindiso, which you spoke about, and then we'll take things from there. I'm going to ask you to keep me honest on time as well, and let me know if I overrun. But I hope I won't. So let's just start with the journey. So I grew up and went to school in a little town in KwaZulu-Natal called Ladysmith, Mthobisi. So I learned how to speak isiZulu first before I learned English, thanks to my helper who I grew up with. And I went to school there, went through the normal rural academics, head boy, newspaper editor, all of those things. And then I decided to go to Wits, made the big trek to the big city in Johannesburg, was blinded by the bright lights a little bit intimidated, but destined to make my mark. And I did my undergrad, so both my degree and my postgrad at Wits. And then afterwards, I decided to join Deloitte as a chartered accountant. So Deloitte has 2 options, I think, if you guys would be familiar. So it's either financial services or general, and that was back when I was in there. And I joined general audit. And during that time, I had a few large clients. So Glencore, Imperial, Astropac, while they were still limited, the JD Group. And I did some interesting work during that time. I had a financial services client which managed to sneak in my portfolio. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because this charts a lot of your destiny going forward. Some of the things, it was so odd when I had Glencore as my client during audit. And I said to my mom, it's almost cathartic / like the world making sense, because when I was in grade 3 back, when we used to do these science expos, I did an expo on coal, and little did I know a few years later, when I was a bit grown up, that I'd be looking back at this and really appreciating the fact that I'd done that. And then I was fortunate enough during my articles to have done 2 secondments. So the first was to Dublin, and that was as a super user. So Deloitte was rolling out new software, so it wasn't audit related, but we were guiding the deployment of new audit software. And then I went across to Luxembourg afterwards for 3 months, where I worked on the Blackstone Group as part of their audit. So that was interesting. I think, in SA, we think we're very diverse, which we are, and we must be proud of. But I think requesting something from someone, a trial balance in Spanish and it not being your mother tongue, and getting something which looks completely different and having to use Google Translate is definitely something that you think about and makes you appreciate life a little bit more. And then when I came back, I decided to join Deloitte in South Africa, but not in audit, in financial services advisory. So for me, it was an element of comfort in the sense that it was a company that I was familiar with, and I was interested in credit risk. So while I was there, I worked on IFRS 9. So that's quite key in the banking sector. It was a new standard at the time, still continues to give many people headaches, and even some of the students as well. I know they'll think about their instruments and back to board exams for those of you who are writing. It's something that almost always comes up. And I did IFRS 9, I did Islamic banking. So I did a further qualification through SEMA, called a diploma in Islamic finance from there. I learned how to code a little bit while I was at Deloitte in a few languages. And I also spent some time on credit and regulatory risk. Did a lot of work for the rest of Africa and the Middle East, and some work for India as well. And then I decided to leave Deloitte and join a private equity company, a boutique corporate finance and private equity company here in Johannesburg as a director. So that was quite cool. Very interesting. The largest transaction that I worked on while I was there in my short stint was about R1 billion. Very interesting, very different world from what I was used to at Deloitte, but a great exposure. And then I decided to join the First Rand Group. So first in a finance role, being an SME in the systems accounting and control space, afforded me a great opportunity to travel as well, once again, through the rest of Africa, doing a lot of deployments and things. And given the fact that I spearheaded a lot of IFRS 9 work at Deloitte, it definitely helped into my transition here. And I think as an auditor, you bring in that sense of controls and risk, and that framework is always there. So I was sitting on a lot of these balance sheet steercos and informing a lot of policy and driving a lot of things. I think it was great. I had a great opportunity. I was nominated as a newcomer of the year at RMB. I didn't make it through the qualification process, but I did make through as being nominated. So that was great. And then I decided to join FNB Rest of Africa last year as Chief of Staff / Executive Assistant / Second in Charge. That was a great opportunity that came into my play, and I'm very grateful for that. I think, initially, if I have to think about it, Mthobisi, and I say this with a bit of lightness because I didn't know what an executive assistant does, and I'm sure a lot of the people on the call don't as well. So in my naivety, when I joined RMB, there was a colleague of mine who's now a very close friend, and we happened to work together quite a lot. And I was like, I wanted to actually meet with the CFO when I joined in, with us all being young, ambitious people in the finance world. We want to go and map our path and say hello to these bigwigs. And, there's a lot of these coffee conversations which happen and drive where you are and, your growth through the business and just give you a different perspective. And I asked another executive assistant for some time in the executive's diary, and she correctly pointed so that she's actually not a personal assistant, she's an executive assistant. And I was like, I thought that meant the same thing, It was just a glorified title, to be quite honest. And a little did I know it wasn't. It is a very interesting role. I think, the way it's marketed is very different. It is not the same thing as a PA. Yes, I see a comment from Tumi. I am not a PA. I think, with all those 7 years at minimum of studying and board exams, I would need to be a really well-paid PA for them to employ me at some point. I think I make a good cappuccino, but I think that's as far as my skill set goes. So when people do actually message me now for time in my CEO's diary, I do chuckle a little. But I think I want to speak to you guys a little bit about what an executive assistant does. I think that'll be quite key for everyone to know. So it's called a chief of staff in some organizations. It's called an executive assistant. I know when my boss hired me, he said, he introduced me as his right hand. And I didn't really appreciate the magnitude of what he was saying at that point in time. And now, about just over a year and some change later, I do appreciate this a little bit more because it is a role that a CA can do because we have the skills and the training, but it's using a very different skill set of yours. It's not just your reporting and your complex mind where you can do all of these hectic consoles and you can audit a client to death and all of these stuff. No, it's a combination of everything. And I think I prefer the strategic stuff. So for me, this gives me great exposure to that. So if I've talked you through a typical day, I don't know what a typical day is, to be quite honest. My day changes on the fly, on the regular. There are certain things which are marked in as, for example, certain things that I need to attend, depending on what the strategy is defined by leadership. I think for me, it's a great opportunity because as a young person, I mean, I just turned 30 this year. So, you know, I still sometimes, you know, when someone asks you, it's almost in 29 mode still. So you're like, oh, I'm still in my 20s. And for me, it means a lot, you know, to have representation, to be a young person, first of all, to be a person of color, to be sitting at a table with Exco and having my voice heard, to say, guys, I don't agree with something, for example, that maybe the CFO has put forward, or I can question, and I have the opportunity to ask. So a typical day looks very different in terms of what it could be. As I said, there's certain things which we need to do consistently. So there's reporting. So either at board level or at a segment level, or for any ad hoc requests that might come across the CEO's desk. So for example, now with COVID, there's been a lot more emphasis on reporting and other analytics, and we're trying to drive a lot of things from the business's perspective. But also going forward, you know, and I think it gives you a holistic lens because you're allowed to take a step back. I think as a pure finance professional, sometimes we're so embedded in the detail. So I think of it back to my days at varsity, and you know, when we thought about Michael Porter and all of his 5 forces and strategy, these are the things that you're thinking about because you're thinking bigger. You always need to be with it. You know, you need to understand what's going on in the business. You need to look at things from a holistic lens because I look at the retail and commercial portfolio specifically, and there's a colleague of mine who's also an AWCA, Tina, who looks at this CNI part. But I think with the rest of Africa portfolio, we're so blessed in the sense that we're able to look at both retail, commercial, and corporate and investment banking because of the portfolio being so wide. And it's almost several or 8 iterations, if I have to think of it, across the countries, with each having a specific nuance. So in this year, for example, I can speak about this because it's public knowledge. There was an acquisition of another bank. And that was interesting for me because, you know, we usually see this in context, in a concept form that you're acquiring a business, but you never go through all of the logistics and things. And even with the disposal as well, which is on the go in terms of certain businesses, or even when something is, for example, not working. It's very interesting to see all of these concepts come together and how you add value, because a lot of the times your executive will ask you, what is your opinion on something? And I think you need to apply your mind firstly to the subject matter and then think about what are the considerations related thereto. So, so that's some of the things that I think about. I think in terms of some of the skills that you have, I think as a CA, you're very well equipped to be in this role. I mean, we're very detail orientated, you're very methodical, you're very task orientated. Yes, there are some days where your day is a bit lighter and there's not many meetings, but there are some days, for example, where your day goes on to the next day, which is in certain environments, it happens over a reporting period, or over other times where you need to provide certain information, or where there's just a lot of requests. So I think, you know, it is something which is interesting. I know it's a bit difficult to articulate, and it's a bit of an open role. So you can define how you want to, what you want to do and how you want to be of service. So last year, I spent 2 months in Mozambique because they were appointing a new head of finance, and I felt like I could help. So I helped them with specific things. And it was specific finance areas. So I got to go back to my skills and look at goodwill and look at other things, you know, your technical knowledge, and re-unpack that and apply and get to grips with some of those things. So I think it was really great in that sense that you could have that opportunity. I think it is an open role in the sense that there's certain things which are expected from you in terms of what your executive expects, but I think it's also dependent on your relationship. So I would say another thing which I think is key is how you build relationships, because that's very key. Because a lot of the times I will get a request today at 5 p.m. that I need to report something on information that I don't have at my disposal. And I need to go and reach out to certain individuals after hours in their family time. Yes, work from home has sort of blurred the hours, but you still need to reach out to them and have their support for them to provide that information to you so that you can report probably tonight, because it might need to go out. So I think, relationships is one thing which I think which is key. And I think you take that from whichever route you've gone through, either whether you went into public practice or whether you went to an audit firm, you understand these things as a CA. Also, report writing is key. Condensing big chunks of information, Mthobisi, into information that's salient, that can go to different levels. I think, as a CA, you always think about these things where people say, you're presenting to the board, or you're presenting to Exco, or you're presenting to shareholder. What is your different lens? And you realize the different levels of granularity and the conversations that are taking place, and what are they really looking at? So for me, I think it's a great opportunity to understand, to look at things holistically, to see strategically what the business is doing, where it's going. And I think a lot of the times, as a reporting accountant, you might miss out on this, because you do get some elements of it, you get some wind of it that might affect your ambit, but it's not a lot of the stuff that you would see traditionally in a traditional space. It's not a traditional CA role. And I think it's very dependent on who you're supporting as well. So I'm supporting the CEO, so my role is very strategic. Someone who's supporting the CFO, theirs might be very financially driven. Yes, there are elements of finance, there are elements of risk, there are elements of people, but I think you get a better rounding as far as an executive assistant to a CEO. And I'm speaking from a biased opinion because this is what I've seen. But I know there are executive assistants to a chief risk officer, for example, who they might have an interest in risk and foresee a future for themselves there. Or, I think it's a really great segue into the business in terms of building relationships, in terms of exposure, getting yourself out there. People know you a lot more. I think we had a piece of work that I did right now for our leadership conference, and I think it was a very big blessing where I got a message from Mary Vilkazi, who's our COO at First Rand, saying, well done. So for me, that was a big thumbs up, to say your work is being recognized. There is some element of acknowledgement. So I think it's something that I would definitely say is there. I don't know if you have any questions that you want to ask me, Cindy. So if there's any questions on the chat, perhaps.
I think you've answered all the questions that I had for you, but one of the things that you mentioned is that you got to get some experience in other countries. So how important would you say it is for us as trainees to want to broaden our horizons and not just limit ourselves? Because as you said, as qualified CAs, or even while we are doing our training, we've got so many opportunities that are available to us. So how important is it for us to be open-minded in what it is that we want to do and what we want to venture into? And how has your experiences in venturing into other countries impacted your career thus far?
So I think there are definitely opportunities, and I think just hold me honest if I answer your question fully, and let me know. I always want to fully answer someone's question. So I think there are opportunities in African countries to go and make an impact. I think it depends on the organization you join as well. As a trainee accountant, you need to decide who you're joining. So if you're joining a little company, for example, that has just operations in South Africa, then perhaps maybe you'll travel provincially and you'll get exposure to different cultures within South Africa. However, if you're joining a company that has a multinational footprint or is willing to grow, there are opportunities. And I suppose it depends in which space you also place yourself in. So for example, when I was in finance, I was in a head office space. When I was at Deloitte, we were in Deloitte Africa. So there was a broader horizon. Now where I am, and we're looking at an Africa portfolio. So I think those experiences definitely shape you. You have an appreciation as well. I think a lot of people use the term, and I don't mean this in any way which is negative, but South Africa is like Africa Light in the sense that we're a lot more developed than a lot of the other countries in certain ways. And not to say that they aren't as well, or that they don't have their strengths, but I think things operate a lot differently in other countries. I find a lot of the other countries as well, the local people are a lot more respectful. They're a lot more endearing. They're they really like appreciate, they love having South Africans there. I think, that's one of the things that I've appreciated, the strangers of kindness, the kindness of strangers as well. I think, in these countries, for example, when you're going to get a meal like after work and you're walking around and someone from the office is just going to redirect you somewhere, to go and find something. If you've got dietary requirements like myself, I think, it definitely helps. I think these experiences shape you because you build a network as well, Nontsindi, so across the continent. You get an appreciation of people's cultures. You get to understand how privileged we are to be in Africa, which is like this diaspora of beautiful cultures that we're in, of the people, of their food, of how they behave, of how they do business, of the slight nuances in terms of business, of what works, for example, in SA might not work in the rest of Africa. From a product perspective, from the way in which you carry yourself, it's all the soft skill kind of stuff as well, I think, that comes through. So I think that is definitely one thing. I think you also get an appreciation of cultures. I know for me personally, I always try and like learn a little bit of the language before I go or while I'm there, just so I can like say a few words. And I feel like it builds this great connection between you and the people in country. For me, that's really important. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. So you mentioned that you have a diploma in, besides being a qualified CA, you also have a diploma in Islamic finance, which you obtained with SEMA. So I know for most of us, we assume that it's either SAICA or it's SEMA. So what motivated you to want to actually do both and diversify?
No, 100%. So I was honestly wondering what is the next step, like most of our other CAs. So would you do CFA? Do you do SEMA? Do you do something else? Do you do FRM? Do you do an MBA even? Like, what is your next step? And for me at that time, it made the most sense because at Deloitte, I was starting to drive the Islamic finance value proposition. So I needed these skills. I felt like it would add a lot of value to my CV and to the work that I was doing. It's something that's, first of all, close to my faith because I want to understand the banking nuances. Secondly, I want to make sure that I add value to business. And I think third, I also thought, it's also a qualification. It didn't read that much investment from me in terms of timing. I knew I could sacrifice X amount of time, get the exams done and go through it while I'm at Deloitte and still drive a career. So I think, for me, that was quite key. I think the decision in terms of choosing it almost happened organically just because of what was there. And I always try, and I think my advice would be to the participants on the call is to consider, for example, what is needed. And I hate to Marie Kondo it, but like sort of what sparks joy in you. In terms of what is your next academic thing if you decide to do it.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. It says, how did you move from the technical and audit related thinking to the strategic hats that was required? Because from trainees, it's a very much different mindset. No,
I agree. I think it depends on your training as well. So for me, I think once you sort of, once you're in third year, you start to see the audit file or the client a lot differently. You start seeing it as a business and a relationship. So it's key that you make that transition mentally, that you now need to look at this in a very different perspective. So I automatically started to like change my thinking. I think even from first year, I was very motivated about building these relationships with the clients and trying to think of things strategically. So what is the implications? I think when you're there first year, like you're thinking about banking cash and OPEX, and you need to audit these things. So you're not really thinking far too much about other things. But I think once you go through your transitions, I for myself, while I was at Deloitte, I decided to leave, and I thought, had I stayed on this path, I could potentially pave a way to partner, and that wasn't something that I wanted to do. I felt like I wanted to go out and I wanted to make business. I wanted to make an impact on business. So it was sort of changing that way of thinking by myself and forcing myself to say, how do you then re-navigate this landscape? Because it was a challenge, and I will admit it was a challenge initially to say, a lot of the times you're very rigid in terms of an audit mindset. You're thinking controls, risk, compliance, which you should always keep in mind. It's part of our bread and butter that makes us who we are, and it makes us so good at what we are. But you need to think beyond that. And I think that's what's going to separate the next generation of leaders, which I think we are. In terms of saying that we think beyond that, we think about other things, we think about the impact on others, we think about rights issues, we think about transparency, we think about representation. these are all the things that we need to bring into corporate culture, because we are going to navigate the workplace of the future for the newer generation that's coming after us, and something that we want to create. It might not happen organically, and it's not going to be like an overnight switch that changes, but I think we're part of this change. So it's key for us to drive this in terms of the thinking. And that's how I sort of forced myself. I was like, dude, you need to switch on. You need to think strategically. You need to see, what is this business doing? It's almost like a business case vibe, where you're like, how is this thing viable in terms of your mindset? And if you take your mind in that and you say, if it was my business, what would I do? Or think of it from the different sides. So sort of like board exam changed that for me, because it was like, think about things from a different way. And we wrote the first exam that was written, the new format, which you guys are writing now as well, pre-computer, but new format. So that definitely changed it, because I was like, you need to think of things from different lenses, not just the space you find yourself in.
Wow, that was so informative. Thank you so much for your time, Imtiyaaz, and thank you for availing yourself tonight.
Thank you so much, Nonsundi. So I think my last parting words for everyone before I go off would be to definitely pursue different things. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. I think it's key to learn, and I think happiness and success are two things which you guys are going to have to try and define for yourselves. And I hope that you don't try and follow anyone else's path. Follow your own, make your path. We are all trailblazers. We're going to make it. So I look forward to meeting a lot of the guys when we can in future. And thank you once again to AWCA for having me.
Thank you so much for your time.
Sorry. Okay, that was quite an informative session. Definitely, we are trailblazers, and the sky is the limit. Next up, we have Nancy.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Nancy.
How are you? Sorry, I apologize for my video. It keeps knocking out when I try and switch it on. So I think I'll have to keep it off just for the sake of
No worries. No worries. Thank you so much for.
Thank you for having me.
So to everyone, Nancy is currently the Chief of Staff for the Africa Middle East CFO, and she's also the Controls Leader at Cummins Inc. Thank you once again for availing yourself tonight. So please tell us a bit more about yourself, and also just as your role as the Chief of Staff as well, but to the CFO, unlike Imtiyaaz, who is the Chief of Staff to the CEO. I mean, as trainees, most of us aspire to be like the financial manager, the financial director, or the CFO, but we don't really hear much about someone who is the Chief of Staff to the CFO.
Thanks so much, Cindy. So just a bit about myself. Thank you very much for having me again. It's absolutely a pleasure to be sitting on the other side. I am part of the AWCA subcommittee, so it's a pleasure that you guys have invited me as one of your guests. It's really great being here. So yeah, and welcome everyone on the call. I'm excited to share my journey with you. So my name is Nancy Chakabuda, and I am originally from Zimbabwe. I came to South Africa about 15 years ago as a very excited, young, looking forward to university, right? And I was at the University of Cape Town, where I started off actually doing an HR degree. So I started off doing an HR degree. I did it for about a year, and then I realized that my passion lies with accounting, and I switched over. I made every effort to switch over to accounting in the second year. I graduated in record time still in 3 years. I just, one of my philosophies when I was in varsity is that I'm here to get a degree. I just need to put my head down and get it. So I got my degree. At the end of 3 years, of course, as many of us might encounter this, I didn't have the financial means to do my honors degree, my CTA. So what I ended up doing is I enrolled, into my training contract with a medium-sized firm back then. So RSM, previously RSM Becky & Dixon, now RSM South Africa. And then I did my CTA part-time, and that is when everything, I saw fires, if I can put it like that. So I did my CTA part-time with UNISA. And yeah, of course, you're studying part-time, it's new, you're used to studying full-time. I had a couple of subs. I think I had 2 subs. I failed outright tax back then. And then I had a couple of subs, but you know what? The CA CASA next to my name was my vision, right? So I kept pushing. I really did push. I eventually made it to board 1. Again, I stumbled. I failed board 1. And again, I just kept that vision in mind that I want to be a CASA. And one thing that I can just share with everyone on the call is that, just from those failures that I had back then, I realized that, failure is just a step to success, right? It's not something that should hinder you. When you're so young, right, you need to think about, when I'm 30, right, there's still a lot of time is what I'm trying to say, right, when you're still so young. So take a chance, don't let failure, just detract you from your goals. And I'm so glad, that I stuck to what I needed to do back then. So yeah, so within RSM, the audit firm, contrary to, I'm sure a lot of you are from the Big Four firm, I was at RSM Dixon, which is a medium-sized firm. So I was really exposed to everything. I did tax returns. I remember I did trusts, I did individuals, I did churches, you name it. I was there. And I don't regret that experience, right? Because it really, really gave me detailed insights into accounting, into finance, etc. And so I progressed after my training contract. I progressed to being an audit supervisor for about 2 years. I qualified as a CA finally. It was 2012. And back then it was the old board exam. It was auditing. A lot easier than what everyone else has now. So I then did board 2. I passed 2012, and then I was promoted to being an audit manager. I had an opportunity to go for secondment in the USA, which was really, really great. And from there, it was my first time leaving South Africa to go to the US. And from there, I started just engaging with a different culture. I think opened up my mind to, say that, what it is. And I think the secondment opportunity as well, right? Because I'm sure everyone knows, yes, secondment, you're going to help with busy season, right? So you've got auditing left, right, and center. You're really just drenched into auditing when you're there. And I recall when I came back, that's when I really had a pivotal moment where I was like, you know what, I know I don't want to be in audit, right? And then I started, that's when I started the job search as soon as I was back. And I'm glad I did it. I think at that time, I got offered contracts with the bank and then with the organization that I'm with now. And again, at that point, it was a pivotal point, right? Because you need to, I was so lucky to be exposed to mentors back then that really just guided me, right? That you need to ask yourself 3 questions when you come to such a pivotal point in your life in terms of choosing what you want to do next, right? So you need to know what you like, you need to know what you do not like, and you need to know what you can live with. And I was so lucky to have been introduced to this concept back then. And I knew that there was more within a bank that I wouldn't, that didn't gel well with my career plans. And so I joined the corporate world. So I joined Cummins Africa Middle East. Cummins Africa Middle East is a Fortune 200 American multinational company. And I joined as a controls manager, internal controls manager for the finance, purely for the finance function. And I think from just getting this role as an internal controls, one of my key aims was to just learn the business as much as you can, right? And which is what everyone should be striving to when they get into an organization, because it does open up a lot of, it opens up relationships for you. It opens up, skill set that you never thought that you could develop. It opens up roles for you. So it's so important to learn the business, interact with people, talk with people. I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert. I'm sure Tumi and Sue know this. I'm an introvert, right? And so I really just had to push myself out of that shell, right? And say, look, I'm a very ambitious person as well, right? You've got this ambition, right? And no one's going to help you through this ambition but yourself, right? So you have to come out of your shell. You have to interact with people. You have to learn the business. You have to show up. So that's basically what I did in that 1 year that I was a controls manager for finance. I didn't zone myself to finance. I started getting involved, helping the business with issues they were having with finance. And that's when really, there was another controls team sitting in the business. That's when really the controls leader back then, Africa controls leader back then, recognized me, right? And she said, you know what? I need you in my team. Come out of the controls role from finance, and I need you in my team. So after a year, I was fortunate enough to get out of this controls manager role into this mainstream role, supporting the business, right? And I'm so, one of the things that I always look back and say, I've been so blessed to have people believe in me. I think it's important to recognize people within your organization, recognize your village, right, within your organization, recognize people who believe in you and tap into that, right? So I've been so fortunate to have people all the way, even just in the audit firm as well. I had a lot of partners who believed in me, who promoted me, even though I was struggling with failing my exams, etc. They still believed in me, right? So it's so important to recognize your village. So important, right, is if you're in an organization and you do not have a village, right, start thinking about, is this the right organization for me? It is so important because time doesn't wait for everyone, guys. Time does not wait for anyone, sorry. So it's so important. A year goes by so fast. Look, we've been sitting in COVID for 7 months, right? So a year goes by so fast. So it's so important. As soon as you realize that an organization is not your fit, you need to immediately leave, because I can guarantee you there's so many organizations that you'll get into and you'll be like, wow, I've missed out on so much, right? So just recognize your village. I was lucky I then moved into that role. Sorry, since I'm rambling now, but I then moved into that role. And that role was really supporting the business, right? And I think I was in that role for a year, and so I changed managers every year, right? And I think one thing is if you show up at work and you work hard, I always say that to my team, my own team, that show up at work and work hard. I won't have any problems with it. I'm sure everyone knows that. Show up at work, work hard. Your manager's not going to have any problem with you, and that's how you build that trust. So I had 3 managers. I remember in that period when I was a controls manager, whether it's from finance to the mainstream, business controls team. And then, of course, a new leader came in, which was a gentleman who has just really been a blessing to me. I'm sure you know him. His name is Nkosi. So that man has taught me that as a woman, you can find a man within your village. It doesn't have to be another woman uplifting you, right? I know we preach about uplifting other women. I certainly strive for that. But one thing that I've shared is that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a woman. There are men out there who nurture female talent. And I was so blessed to have that mentor. And his name is Nkosi. And so what then happened is that, I started working for Zach, and, of course, he recognized my talent. I just kept working. I was in that role for 2 years. I know at that point is that, it's the point I said, you know what, I don't want to be in core finance for the rest of my life. Ultimately, my goal is to be a general manager, to be a CEO. So I enrolled in my MBA with the Gordon Institute of Business Science, and I did that for 2 years. And again, I was fortunate enough to have an organization that nurtured that, right? So I did my MBA while I was doing that business controls role for about 2 years. That business controls role as well was about relationships, forming relationships with the business leaders across the Africa Middle East region. Like Imtiyaaz said, everything, I always say to my team as well that by virtue of the fact that you're a CA, we know that you've got the technical expertise, right? But relational skills cannot be taught. You can't thrive without the relationship building skills. You can't, right? You can I certainly can't push my agenda within the business without the relationship building skills. So I learned very early on how to interact with people across the region, whether it was Ghana, it was Nigeria. In my controls role, I traveled almost every month, which I loved. So I was on the road, obviously pre-COVID, I was on the road literally every month to Ghana, to Nigeria, to Middle East, etc., supporting the Africa Middle East region. And so, I then got promoted in 2018 after doing 2 years of that role, after I got my MBA. Funny enough, I think the MBA did open this door for me. So I got promoted, and I was promoted to the internal controls leader for the Southern Africa region, still reporting to the same manager, but it was his way of saying that I believe in you, right? And again, it's just about finding that, find your village, right? Just find your village. And then he then obviously got a role 6 months later, and of course it was very easy for them to appoint me as the Africa Middle East controls leader, which is where I am now. So is that enough, Nonsintisha, or do you want me to go on?
Thank you so much. It's so inspiring to hear someone who, after undergrad and postgrad and ITC and APC, still had, the urge and the oomph to continue doing even more and getting more qualifications. And Sistumi has just mentioned that you are a finalist in the top 35 under 35. So
yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I just want to know, you seem to be excelling. How do you maintain your work-life balance? Because you really do sound like a hard worker. So how do you make sure you still make time for other things, you know, that you're passionate about other than just pushing work?
Yeah. That's a very good question, Cindy. So, you know, when I became the Africa Middle East controls lead, I think I started, because now I've got a team, right, that's doing most of the work. I started pulling back from work. You know, you reach a point, to be honest, Cindy, and I'm going to be honest with everyone on the call, where you reach burnout because you've been working so hard. I had 2 years of MBA straight. You know, people didn't see me because I was literally either studying or I was at work, right, trying to put in the hours that I missed because of the MBA. And so I always say to people that, you know what, work will always be there, right? And this is what I'm trying to teach my team as well. Work is always going to be there. Do your 8 to 5. You know, you put your 100%. If you put 150%, I'm telling you, Nonsiso, work will take you 150%. If you put 200%, they'll take it. Give them 500%, they'll take it. But also look at someone next to you who's giving 100% and he's getting equal recognition, right? And so for me, I always say that work, just do your best in the allocation that you have. Take time, you know, to do the things you love. So a lot of the work that I do, Nonsiso, on the side, as you say, so my mainstream job is Africa Middle East Controls Leader. Last year, when I became the Africa Middle East Controls Leader, I was then appointed as the Chief of Staff for the AME CFO, and I've been doing that on the side as well. You know, leading her finance leadership team meetings, setting the agendas. I've introduced leadership themes for her because I'm so passionate about leadership. You know, one thing that I know that she appreciates it was me introducing these leadership themes that go with what's going on within our organization and the finance community that we discuss, talent discussions, etc. So I've introduced all those things, and it's been such a fulfilling journey, being the Chief of Staff. Even just on the side note, I get involved with different organizations like AWCA, you know, and NPC that I'm a board member of, just to keep myself occupied with the things that I love. I'm very passionate about mentoring. So within my organization, I'm involved with, you know, with the Women's Network. I'm involved with the Young Professional Network where I mentor. I have formal mentorships as well. So it's just making time for the things that you love that keep you engaged in work as well. You know, that balance is so important. And so, yeah, so it's just about making time. So that's how I do it, certainly.
Wow, thank you so much for your insights. Do you have any closing words for people who are aspiring to join the finance sector and, you know, venture out of audit, the perks that they can anticipate and the challenges that they'll probably face?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest challenge that we often face as CAs, as I mentioned before, is that we know we are very technical. We get into an organization and we think we can rely on our technical skills. And like I said before, that is not the case. My advice is that sharpen your interpersonal skills. That's the way you're going to open doors for yourself, right? Find a mentor, right? I always lecture people, find yourself a mentor, find yourself someone who's going to guide you, right? Then on a personal development level, one thing that's kept me going and just kept me just balancing that work, because you also need to personally develop yourself, right? Yes, you need to develop your skills in the workplace, but you also need to personally develop yourself. So study. Learning is a lifetime commitment. Learning is not a destination, right? It's a journey. So this is why I did my MBA during this lockdown. I finished a qualification because I'm like, you know what, you've got time. You're sitting at home, you've got 7 months. You can't always be working from 8 to 10 p.m., right? So do a qualification, reinvent yourself. I always say to people, reinvent yourself as a CA, right? Because there's a lot of CAs these days. There's a lot of us, right? So you need to reinvent yourself. What is different about you, right? That will say Nancy will hire this person over this person. What is different about you? So that's my advice: is reinvent yourself. Keep learning. I am such an advocate for learning. Keep learning, keep studying, expand the skill set that we get already from the CA qualification. That's a wonderful qualification that we've been blessed with, right? So expand your knowledge from that as well, and don't just rely on those technical skills. Interpersonal skills are number one. And last but not least, as you rise, please guys, lift others up. Right, like I said, I was so fortunate to have a village lifting me up. I would not be here without the people I had back then. So once you start rising, make that effort to lift others up. It is so important. It is so fulfilling. As you start lifting, as you start rising yourself, lift others up. And that's my advice. Yeah, my advice to young CAs, and keep going. Don't let failure, detract you. Keep going, keep studying.
Thank you so much for your advice. We have a question from the audience. As Phumelele wants to know, please can you tell us a bit more about being a young board member?
That's a very good question. So I know when I got offered this board member, you get because you're young, right? And this is also just true. And I'm going to be vulnerable as well because this is just true in the work environment as well, right? With the chief of staff role, you've got more experienced finance leaders there that you're organizing these meetings and telling them. So it's I think being young already, you've got these insecurities, all right? Even just being a board member, these insecurities that no, you know what if they think I'm too young? What if they see me and they're like, but what I've realized is that people trust the CA qualifications. When I sit at a board meeting, they start asking me questions. I start answering. I start gaining confidence. I'm like, you know what? No, I know what I'm doing, right? I pat myself on the shoulder. I'm like, no, I know what I'm doing, right? So just have faith in yourself. Have faith in your technical ability. You're sitting at the table for a reason, right? And your contribution is valuable. Never keep quiet. Anything that you feel you need to contribute, it's valuable. Never, always just believe in what you feel is valuable.
Wow, I could listen to you all day. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you so much for availing yourself tonight. Thank you, Nancy.
No problem. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Nancy. Wow, that was so informative. Now we're going to move to our next two speakers for the evening. And our two speakers are going to be talking about technical accounting and academia. I'd like to welcome Mthobisi, Malinga, and Mojalefa Mosala. Just unmute them. Hello, guys.
Hi. I'm not sure. Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Oh, okay. Is Mojalefa going to go first? Or shall I?
Yeah. You can, it's fine. I'll start with him. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, cool. That's fine. Hi, Mojalefa. Welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Good evening. Thank you, Spumelele. Thank you so much. I'm not sure if my lighting is proper and if I'm audible enough. My laptop is crashing, so if it starts making noise, please pardon me for that. I have an old, we academics, we use the minimum resources available to
No, your audio is fine as well as your video, but if ever it changes, I'll let you know.
All right, thank you so much, and good evening to everyone that's here, and thank you so much for inviting me. I don't know why you invited me, but I think maybe there's good stuff maybe that I can share, but yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Hello, Mojalefa.
Hi, Nancy.
How are you?
I don't know if that's, I'm good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So just to introduce you to everyone else, Mr. Mojalefa is currently a lecturer at the University of the Free State. So maybe you can just tell us a bit more about yourself and how you got into academics and what it entails to be in academia. I'm sure for most of us, we think it's just about presenting lectures and setting exams and marking scripts, but I'm sure there's so much more. So please just tell us a bit more about that.
All right, thank you so much once more again. Please, I think one of the biggest things that how I got to do this, it came by chance. I was not, at some point, I think as a student, it never got to my mind that one day I'm going to be standing in front of the same students, which perhaps we were in the same class with. Some of them did not make it, some of them made it, and then I get to tutor them, to mentor them. And my journey basically started when I never did accounting in high school. So I didn't even know accounting. I didn't have an idea what accounting is about. And then I asked my teacher, I remember in grade 12, and I asked her, what can I study? I mean, typical of most of us, I mean, we come from schools where there's not enough information, and then you get to varsity and you just enter because there's a course to do and you don't know what's happening. And then I decided she advised me, says, no, you've got mathematics, then you can do accountancy. Well, little did I know that when I got here at the University of the Free State, which is where I got my degree and everything else, then I fell in love with it. I got to meet new people who inspired me to go for it, and then And then I couldn't my degree. Fortunately, I don't know how, but we did well enough, and then that built my confidence. And then I started tutoring, and I didn't realize this, but every time, it gets hectic in accounting. So, but however, anytime I get to spend 2 hours with students just making an impact, assisting them, I got really excited about it. When my own course is chowing, it's killing, it's chowing. But when that time for the tutorial session comes, I get so excited because I felt I was sharing a part of me, and I didn't realize that was going to be very addictive. And then I finished my degree, finished my CTA, and I was invited to be an academic trainee, which was really exciting. And I thought, let me go for it. And then I went to lecture financial accounting, then got to see the environment, and perhaps something that ignited my passion for education, teaching and learning. And a year later, then I had to go do my articles. And I did my articles at a very big parastatal. Every time I was there, things were going well. And every time I left, things messed up. ESCOM, I was at Megawatt Park in Sunny Hill, and things were really looking sharp. And I want to say I'm really grateful for them. They financed my studies. They were crazy. And I really appreciate them. When I see them in the news, I just go, that is so sad. But they really assisted when no one could assist me. So I did my articles at ESCOM for 2 years. And it was during the time of Brian Molife and Anwar Singh, and great, exciting times, I must say. And I learned a lot, great, passionate, professional people during that time in finance. And I got so much motivation from that. And then I got to see what I don't want to be. I got to see great guys who come in and they are in finance, in tax, in internal audit, because you got to rotate in different departments. And I thought, I'm not going to do this. I'm not into corporate. And at the back of my mind, there was always this idea that I want to go into academia. I want to go back. And for some reason, that kind of happened. After I finished my articles, I strongly thought about it. I remember consulting with one of the lecturers from UJ. Who's that guy who did tax board 1, who does board 1 course? I don't know what's his name. The black guy from UJ who does board 1 course. I forgot his name. But I called him, and then he told me, no, go for it. You can finish your articles. And after I finished my articles, I signed off. I couldn't wait to sign off. And during that time, I must say, one of the, they say CTA is tough, but my article period is actually one of the worst. And that's one of the defining moments how I got to decide what I wanted to do. I remember waking up one of the other days and I'm like, I needed to get motivation to go to the office. And I just thought to myself, Jeff, do you really want to do this every day of your life for the next 5 years, 10 years, where you wake up and you're just like, I'm not in the mood for this? And it hit me right there to say, what is the one thing that I really want to do? And then I Sunday evening, and I'm just thinking, tomorrow it's Monday, but I'm okay. And then I thought about the excitement I used to get when I got in front of the students, when I got to engage with the students, because one of the things about academia is it's a lot more than just teaching, lecturing. You become a mentor by force. I mean, these guys come to you, they can relate to you, and the kind of discussions I used to have with the students. And that's why during this lockdown, I'm a bit depressed, because they just pop into my office and we just have discussions about what's happening at home. Are you okay? And we start talking about the things that got them excited. And that sort of reminds me of why I do what I do. So I woke up and I was like, are you adding value? Is this something that you really want to do? Where you wake up every day and you're asking yourself questions about this? And then I thought, I'm gonna go into academia. And fortunately, immediately after I signed off, I never got to work as a qualified CA in practice for any matter. I immediately got an opportunity to come to the university. I started off as a tutor program manager. I was running a program for about 80 students. We've got a smaller one compared to other bigger institutions in Gauteng. So I came to Bloom, ran a tutor program, and I was very excited about it because I got to mentor a lot of young, talented students, most of whom today are actually CAs. And yeah, the age gap was not too much of an issue. I'm currently 29, and I started doing them at 27. And I've got students that were reading the program at third year, second year, and most of them are currently or two, I think, doing their second year of articles. So it's very exciting. That's what fulfills me. I'm very passionate about impact. I'm very passionate about the communities that I'm involved in. I do research with communities around to see how, as an accountant, I can add value in that space. And one of the things that I do as an academic in this environment, I'm much more closer to our students. So I've taken an initiative to do something someone never did for me, which is literally deciding to mentor. I mean, Nancy mentioned earlier on, as you rise up, you lift others. And I identify any student that comes to my office, I intentionally link them with friends that I have. I mean, she mentioned the whole secondment to America, where I've got friends that are all over. If I ask you and someone's like, I'm from KZN, Newcastle, I'm like, oh, I've got a friend from there. Here's their email, do the linking. So I do this whole delegated mentoring session because I just want to get them to something I never had. And I think one of the biggest disadvantages as a CA or accountancy student is that the role of mentorship is not clearly communicated, because if you ask most students, what do you want to do? They just want to be CAs. After you get to be a CA, your life is sometimes miserable, because the next thing you do, you don't make a decision about what job you want. You basically are forced into an environment just because you have bills to pay, you've got this pressure to do. And then after 2-3 years, you're just like, what should happen? And I think for me, the biggest driving force how I got to get involved in academia was mostly because I got passionate. I said, what drives me? And that decision was based on this thinking that I usually have. I always say, if someone gave me 3 years to live, if someone told me, Jeff, in the next 3 years or 2 years, you will no longer be here. My motivation is always, what would you be doing for those 2 years? And remember, time determines what you prioritize. And I always say, if I'm going to consider lecturing only later, some of us are like, I'm going to start with this thing, and then the one thing I'm passionate about is when I start winding down maybe in my career. I said, let me start with the things that I really want to do, the things that if I said I had 2 years, I would focus on, and I said, basically, I live like that. I live my life as if I'm not promised tomorrow, and I'm going to maximize on the things that get me. So I'm very happy with what I do. I love it. And it's tough. It's not easy. I'm currently still at the office. During this COVID-19, we're actually working 10 times harder, and our students are also going through the emails, the WhatsApp. We've got a WhatsApp group of 600 students. So you can imagine when they are on strike with the online tests, you don't sleep. And but I love it. So yeah, I don't know if I said enough. Can I share a picture, Lucy, so if you allow me? There's a picture I want to share. There's a picture I wanted to share, which I had in varsity, and it was, this is the picture. Can you see this?
Yes.
This was me in varsity, and the course was chowing. It was one of those 10 minutes power naps. It was a 10 minutes power nap, and after that, we continue with the chowing. So it's a 24-hour study log. I'm not the smartest, but I was a hard worker. I always told myself, the course can chow, but we will chow back with effort and power and strength. So this was one of the pictures taken by a friend while I was sleeping. And down there, I've got Powerade, I've got Fanta, and I'm trying to put all stuff. So in closing, I think, guys, you ultimately, you get there with time, and if you just persevere and trust in the journey, and you finally get what you're looking for. So yeah, that's my story.
Your passion is so evident.
Having done your articles at Eskom, what would you say are some of the skills you learned during your article years that you find very relevant in your current role?
Sure. My article period was very interesting. So when I got to Eskom, we've got what we call internal assessors. So when you rotate into different departments, you've got someone that doesn't work with you in your training program, but then they are the ones you take your portfolio of evidence to, and they decide whether you colleagues met that competency or not at 4A, 4B. Remember those days when you chasing competencies? And for me, it was quite a different one because I just come from academia and I needed to finish my program in 2 years. I got then, remember we talk as trainees. So when I got there, the third years tell us, I hope you didn't get this other lady as your assessor. Then I got that person as my assessor. She was tough. She was tough. She was a white woman, and well, race has nothing to do with it, but she was really, me and her, we didn't see her eye to eye at some point. But the biggest lesson from that was, number one, you need to be clear about what you stand for. And by that, I mean, if you don't accept a certain level of treatment, be able to communicate it, put it forward, and communicate in a respectful, smart way, because, you know, relationships are important. I mean, the previous speakers talked about it. You want to take these relationships everywhere. I mean, she held quite a senior position, and even though we disagreed on issues, I needed to put that forward very well, and I learned my lesson because I almost got burnt. And the second one was, you know, when you're put under pressure, and especially the article period, I actually learned that the reason you need article period to not be the most exciting period of your life is because, you know, it's like a diamond that you need to put through fire to burn so that it can come out better. I came out better. She was so pedantic about the stuff, the little details, a comma, why is your file not neat? I think during that year or that article period, I had the cleanest, the best file, because she would tell you your file looks like a mess, to just make a fuss about everything. And today I'm actually like that. I'm very pedantic about everything that I work with and how I can make it better all the time. So the biggest lesson is, you know, whatever process you're going through right now, there's always going to be a positive output if you just have the right attitude with that. And it builds you. It builds you as a person. It builds you as a professional. And the tougher times you go through earlier in your journey, you're going to be, if you're having it easy currently, that should scare you. You should want someone that doesn't care, not really care, but someone that can put you to your limits and test how far you can go. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any plans on studying further?
Well, it comes without a choice. I'm currently busy doing a proposal for my master's, and so I have no choice. It's something that comes with it. I mean, earlier you guys asked what are some of the things that one should do as an academia. Well, there's quite a lot that is involved, and I think there's this general understanding that no, academia is quite easy. It's where the lazy people just want to go and relax. Yo, guys, the expectations are crazy. You're supposed to have research output. You're supposed to manage a class, administrate all your 800 or 600 students or 1,000 students. Make sure that all the marking, all the marks, so you actually sit, and what we were sold when you started is actually a lie. That's why I say you have to be driven by passion more than anything else. The only time I think one of the biggest things, if you ask most lecturers or people in academia, what's the best time? The best time is when we sit in front of the students or stand in front of and start engaging. Everything else is a mess. You don't want to do that. So studying, I have to. There's absolutely no choice. I've done 2 teaching and learning presentations, research on that. So that's what I have to do. And I'm also sitting on doing other board stuff on the side because I do have kind of little bit time. And so I try to advance myself in that area and share my skills wherever I am. And with NPOs as well, I'm kind of working on it. So I have to study. It's something that Nancy mentioned earlier, you know, a differentiating factor. Apart from what drives you, your passion, you also have to try to upskill yourself in a way that you can become relevant in an ever-changing world currently.
I noticed that you sit on quite a few committees, and you just touched on that a bit. Can you expand on how you try fit everything into your very busy schedule?
I think one of the biggest things, the biggest thing that drives me, and I'm very clear about it, and that's why it attracts me to leadership positions, is because I'm very passionate about making an impact. I'm very passionate about seeing a change wherever I am. And that always then gets me into this trouble where I find myself in leadership positions, but I get excited about it because that's what drives me. So there's quite a lot of time that is involved in that. And I actually went into an intentional process of saying, where do I want to see, where do I see myself in the coming future? And one of the things that I would give also as a tip to the young trainees here is, if you want to see yourself as part of a board, start serving on boards at higher levels, serve in NPOs at a whole low level, not even for just experience, but literally get involved, get your hands dirty, and that's how you build leadership. Leadership, I mean, leaders are not born. It's through exposure to different areas. So then I found myself in these NPOs, and then from there on, then you just get recommendations, you get calls, you get people saying, oh, I want to work with you, and it's interesting. And then age doesn't matter. I mean, I sit on I'm a finance chairperson of the Free State Cricket Union. So Cricket South Africa has in each province a cricket union, which then feeds into the national team and also the different franchises if you are a fan of cricket. And I get to lead people that are old enough to my father's parents, whatever, but it's because of experience through, I mean, even at church, I served in every platform. I just wanted to make it, not because of anything, but I was just passionate about it. So as a tip, I would say, if you see yourself, adding value in different committees, wherever, just start serving wherever you are. And that's how I try to make time. It gets really hectic, but yeah, I guess it's the price you pay for liking things.
I can see that you're very passionate about your role, but can you just touch on what would you say you find most challenging working with students and being a lecturer?
Sure. Well, the biggest challenge I think we have in our education system currently is the effect of the inequality that we have as a country. I'm not going to lie and say that does not have an effect on how I deliver content. I mean, case in point, the fact that during COVID-19, we've got students that have access to an extra laptop and they've got a Wi-Fi router that's reliable in a very fluent area versus students who literally have or stay in a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom house, and I give them the same task, same notes, and expect them to also give me this, and I cannot factor in their limitations into my their assessment process, for instance. So I think the biggest challenge, I guess, with everyone would agree on this, who's in academia or who's in education, would realize that it becomes so difficult for you as a lecturer when you want to deliver quality education, but also not compromise those students that are in an unfair situation or position. And that for me becomes difficult. And the second one is students coming from different backgrounds. I have a friend who's teaching student learners in a township school. And in most township schools, I mean, no matter how good you are as an accounting teacher, chances are that when you are explaining concepts during accounting class, then you sometimes revert to their mother tongue, where you try to explain a new concept, then you start going into what is an asset, what is this, and then they don't get it, so you then come in and chip in with that. So they get used to that, and then what you have in a class of 800 students in an auditorium, you're going to get students coming from more affluent schools, and they are able to participate more, they are confident, they can engage, and that makes, so that's the difficult thing, teaching students that are coming from different backgrounds, not because it's anyone's fault, but because that's the system that, and then it becomes unfair to the rest. So that's the biggest challenge, as to how do you make sure that you don't compromise quality, but also make sure no one is left behind in your teaching.
Definitely. I definitely love the passion that you have for your current role. And I hope that the audience and anyone that's tuned in here can be more passionate about the work they do. I think when you're passionate about something, you're willing to go the extra mile, and it doesn't feel like a job where you're just 9 to 5 and I'm out. And I just hope that we have more lecturers that are as driven as you are to give the students the knowledge and nurture them as they come up. Thank you so much, Mojalefa. I will just ask you to stay on the line if any questions pop up. Next up, we are joined by Mthobisi Malinga, who's a qualified CA and is a IFRS specialist at MultiChoice. Mthobisi, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Phumelele. I appreciate the invite. I wanted to switch on my video, but I am a full-time father, and my daughter is a bit of a handful. Much more difficult to deal with her than it is to deal with some of the technical accounting concepts that I deal with on a daily basis. So I'll keep my screen off for now.
Oh, okay, that's completely fine.
Okay, sweet. So maybe I'll just start off by maybe just introducing myself in terms of my timeline and how I've ended up where I am today at MultiChoice. So I come from Durban, from a township called Mlazi. I went to school at a boys' school, Glenwood High School in KZN. I then left to see greener pastures in Johannesburg, and I got a bursary from Deloitte to study at the University of Johannesburg, where I did both my degrees, and then obviously thereafter I had to serve back my bursary funding at Deloitte, where I did my articles. I was lucky enough to stay over at Deloitte after my articles, where I joined the technical accounting team that supported the audit practice. I stayed there for 2 years. I really have a very soft spot for Deloitte in my heart. I really enjoyed my time there, the people that I met there, and maybe just talking about people that I met. Imtiyaaz was one of the people that I met at Deloitte. I remember we audited Glencore together. Some fun times we had. Imtiyaaz at in Mpumalanga at the mines. So I really enjoyed my time at Deloitte, and I met great people there, made good relationships that I still carry till this day. I left Deloitte actually quite sadly for me, but it was one of the best decisions I think I've made in my career so far, because when I left Deloitte, I just wanted to take a sabbatical, where I wanted to think about where I wanted to go with my career, and where I wanted to find an area where I add value. And I think I hadn't yet figured that out. And I think the qualification allows the opportunity for one to sit back and really think about the different opportunities that are available out there. And it's important that we refer to it as just a qualification, because I've identified a lot of the times people look at CA as an occupation, but in reality it is purely just a ticket to open many doors to many different occupations. So I had the opportunity 6 months where I sat at home. Ironically, I had just proposed to my fiancée at that time, and you can imagine how stoked she was about the fact that I'll be sitting at home while she goes to work and earns the money. So I really enjoyed the 6 months, because I got an opportunity to think with a clear mind, without the hustle and bustle, to really apply myself in terms of where I want to go next. And lo and behold, I had an opportunity to join the public service, which was something that actually was not in my thought process when I was sitting during my sabbatical. So nonetheless, I had an opportunity a unique opportunity to join the city of Johannesburg. Maybe for those that don't know, but the city of Johannesburg houses service delivery in statutory entities. So, for instance, City Power is a 100% owned subsidiary of the municipality, and they provide electricity to the municipality. We've got Joburg Water that provides water. You've got Pick It Up that provides waste management services. And then you also have the Johannesburg Social Housing Company. And those are the entities where I was allocated as a representative of the shareholder to sit in the boards as well as the subcommittees of those entities where I, in essence, represented the city and the city's interest. It was quite a unique experience, especially, knowing, the public sector, with mainly grey hair sitting in such positions, in board positions, and they, in essence, had to answer to a young 20-something-year-old as to what their plans were to deliver services to the people of Johannesburg. It was quite an eye-opening experience, and not knowing or not having any experience in politics, I learned a lot in my 2 years that I spent sitting in the boards of those entities. I really, again, enjoyed my time there, with the exposure, and in particular, the people that I worked with, people from different backgrounds, chartered accountants, engineers, lawyers, the works. And I think I grew a lot in terms of my business acumen, and how to carry myself when I sat in those boards and so on. So like my experience in the city was a very pleasant experience, and again, it was time for me to move on when I decided to leave the city, where I had an opportunity. Again, I'd call it the unique opportunity because I due to mandatory audit firm rotation, Deloitte had a division that provided advisory services that were now going to be prohibited by the legislation where audit firms have to rotate, and a spin-off of the division that was sold by Deloitte to the partners that sat in the division was a company called Solu Growth. And Solu Growth were looking for a young technical accountant to head their consulting accounting division, and I so happened to be available to have conversations with the CEO, and he offered me an opportunity, and I took it with both hands. And in essence, that's how I left the city to be a consultant. Again, had spent a year at Solu Growth, and I had a great time at Solu Growth, where I learned a lot about selling. I learned more about selling, and I also learned more about selling as a consultant. So I learned a lot of selling, and that was quite a different role, because I think being a junior individual, I think in society, particularly when it comes to networks and, which really drives our business community, I hadn't identified myself as someone who has the network to actually head a consulting division in a business. I think at that time it was about a 300 million rand business. So it was a fairly big business, that I was involved in. So, I learned quite a lot about how to carry myself in the business community, how to sell, myself and sell the company that I represent, and really develop good relationships, as opposed to purely working on relationships that are going to result in revenue. I think that's the one thing I took out from my experience as a consultant. I then had another unique opportunity when a NASPAS sold a division, or they listed a division in their business, being MultiChoice. So MultiChoice used to be a division in NASPAS. They decided to list the business in about 2 years ago, and as part of the listing or the unbundling of MultiChoice, the technical accounting division left with NASPAS. So MultiChoice listed without a technical accounting division. So obviously they really struggled with the auditors in their first year, and as part of the recommendations of the audit committee, they had to hire someone to head the technical accounting department. And funny story was that I actually went to MultiChoice to have a chat with them about the potential opportunities for consulting, and I suppose I made a good impression, and the conversation evolved to them actually offering me an opportunity to start off the technical accounting department. I started at MultiChoice in September last year. It's been all systems go from there. I really love what I do there. It's again a multinational company. They're operating in Africa, in Europe, and I've received lots of opportunities, and there's still more opportunities for me, even as a specialist, specializing in technical accounting. I'm really enjoying my time at MultiChoice. I am involved in other things as well. I'm involved with SAICA in the context of I'm a committee member in the accreditation committee accrediting the universities to run a SAICA accredited degree. I also sit in the URBA accreditation committee, which accredits SAICA to run a program that is in line with the URBA requirements. I am also involved in the APT program as a external moderator. I also mark for SAICA ITC as well as APC, and what else do I do? I'm a guest lecturer at UJ, and I of late have started assisting Fort Hare with the University of Fort Hare with their honours or their PGDA program with regards to setting of papers, and I'm also doing my master's in accounting through UJ. In the words of Jeff, the course is showing. I'm really enjoying that as well, and I really enjoy everything that I do. It's it really comes together for me, and I continually am learning, and I also feel I contribute and add value in the spaces that I'm in. I'm quite selective about the areas in which I want to be involved in, and I think that's associated with what the qualification can do for a person. It gives you choices. It gives you choices to choose what you want and when you want to do it. So yeah, like that's me. I think maybe just to address the question of why technical, why technical accounting, and I think there is some sort of a misconception of that, in general about accountants, that people think that we are number crunchers, and I don't know about you guys, but I think after my first year, I've seen minimal, or I've struggled with minimal numbers, and it's actually a very word or diction based industry that we're in. And I think for me, why I chose technical accounting was that technical accounting is purely a tool for me to understand business. And it's never a cutthroat answer. I think academically speaking, there's always a right answer. And they say, as a joke in practice, is that whenever you have a problem, the first question I ask you is, what answer do you want? That drives the narrative in terms of then how we articulate ourselves in terms of putting forward a position. And I think for me, when you look at the commercial nature of transactions, which have become more and more complex, and even if you look at the accounting standards, more and more standards are required. Ideally, in a perfect world, the conceptual framework should take care of everything. I mean, there's a debit and there's a credit for every transaction. It's an in and there's an out. However, due to the complexities that exist in the workplace, accounting has had to adapt, and in that process, we've had to understand the economics of a transaction, and that's really what gets me excited. Is really to understand the economics of a transaction and what is the substance of what the transaction holders are trying to achieve. Lastly, I think, being an expert in a particular area, I refer again maybe to Jeff to say that, it always is a great opportunity for people in practice to collaborate with people in academia, because ultimately, the guys that are being prepared academically will end up in practice, and they need to be ready, to apply themselves in the workplace and contribute in that regard. And I think I've had the opportunity through, as I've mentioned, all my involvement in the academic space, to try and find that balance, between, academia, teaching what is relevant from a practice perspective, and fortunately or unfortunately, our profession is one of the few professions that are really driven by what is happening in practice. So it's very important that we find alignment in terms of academia and what is happening in practice. Maybe I'll just then end off just to say, from an opportunities perspective, I think the one big thing, throughout my career so far, being a technical accountant, is my access to senior individuals. And again, I always say, when someone comes to a technical accountant to request clarity, it's because things are buck. It's normally not because it's a clear cutthroat transaction that anyone can kind of get the answer. So I think engaging with senior individuals who are decision makers, who drive commercial transactions, really has given me the insights in number one, how to run a business, how to be a leader, and so on. And I think I've really appreciated that opportunity that the technical accounting space has provided me. In closing, is just from I mean, it's always good to talk about 4IR and how relevant, for instance, a technical accountant will be in that space. And I think the one area Nancy covered quite well in terms of, and I suppose that's why she's a top 35, under 35, is that, soft skills are very important. Emotional intelligence is something that I think the market or the people around us as accountants, they think we lack. But I think we are becoming more and more aware of that, and operating in an environment like a technology-based environment doesn't take away that element of soft skills. And again, then lastly, being I think I am an academic at heart. I do think that the one skill that we are still struggling to instill in our chartered accountants is the concept of critical thinking, and being one-minded in terms of focusing only on what you see, and sometimes you need to also look at what is not there. Those that study or that know auditing quite well always talk about completeness of information and so on and so forth. And I think for me, that's a skill that I'm still trying to, in my personal space as well, try and instill in potential chartered accountants, as well as guys who've already qualified, that critical thinking, guys, is one of the skills that we carry, and we should reflect that as we sit in boards, as we sit in the different areas of business that we end up in. And I think that for me is an important skill that we need to still develop as a profession. I hope I didn't take too long, but yeah, thanks, guys.
Not at all. Just a few questions from the chat. So someone asked, do you feel your role contributes to restoring the faith in CAs, given that the profession has been under a lot of scrutiny?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I think that my role, it's a role that is supposed to reflect the economics and the commercial nature of transactions. And it is unfortunate that some of our counterparts that or our colleagues that carry the same designation that we carry have tainted our designation. And it is also, in my mind, quite clear that it is not the majority of chartered accountants that are struggling with integrity. But those few bad apples, do taint, they do taint us as a whole. And I think that's when we have the responsibility to stand up and put forward our position. I think Jeff also again mentioned that you must know what you stand for, and you need to voice your opinion. And the imposter syndrome that Nancy mentioned, I think Imtiyaaz also alluded to it, is that you may think that I always say, if it takes me more than 5 minutes to get the gist of it, there's probably something wrong with the transaction, not something wrong with me. And I'm quite quick to highlight that as a fact, to say that guys, I think I've acquired enough knowledge to understand the basics of a transaction, and we need to then be able to have an open and frank conversation if there are issues around integrity of a transaction and how we end up reflecting that transaction in the financial statements. Yeah.
Would you say a technical accounting role requires a person who's a straight A student, or can the average student pursue a career in technical accounting?
Oh, absolutely. It's for us average people. Actually, straight A students, they do other more fancier things. But yeah, no. To answer your question, I think that you don't have to be a straight A student. Personally, I think that a lot of I'd call it success that I've had has mainly been driven by just hard work and determination. I have one of my friends, close friends, who's also on the call, Talent. She'll tell you that when I was still in varsity, I remember I wouldn't mind studying, at 1 a.m. in the morning, just for me to look at additional items that I was excited about, that I wanted to look into. And I think for me, it requires passion. Whatever you do, I mean, we all have passed the threshold, and that's the beauty of the academic system, is that I always say I'm worried that my doctor only needed 50% to operate on me, and it's a bit weird. And I think that for an accountant as well, I at times I do ask myself that, I'm signing off a multi-choice that have about a revenue base of about 55 billion. And, I got 50%, I needed to get 50% to be involved in that company. And I think what pushes me on a day-to-day basis is purely the passion for what I do. And that reflects in the manifesting success.
Okay, given the passion that you have, would you consider mentorship?
Yeah, I am quite passionate about mentorship, and I think that I have a friend who runs a company called Get Ready. I think his motto, it says, lift as you rise, something of that nature, and I quite like it. And I think that we all carry a responsibility from a mentorship perspective to give back, because I think what I haven't had the opportunity to mention are all the people that have carried me in the journey. And I think the Dalai Lama has mentioned that people who live in a community, in an environment where there's a sense of community, are the most happiest. And I think I also live by that principle, to surround myself with people that are going to support me, people that are my official mentors, people that are are my unofficial mentors. And I think the journey of mentoring is something that we all have a responsibility to carry. I don't think it is a talent to mentor people. It's a skill that you develop over time, and you have to just avail yourself to contribute back and add value.
Yes, definitely. As Nancy had mentioned earlier, recognize your village. And I think what you just said goes really well with what she had mentioned. Thank you so much, Mthobisi, for joining us and just providing us with so much insight. I've definitely learned so much during this session. Just to wrap up, I would like to thank all our speakers for taking the time and just providing so much of information for everyone here. A big thank you to everyone that dialed in tonight. I hope you learned as much as I did. Just a reminder that we have our last segment on Thursday, so definitely please do tune in again. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Take it easy. Cheers.
Thanks. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you, everyone.
How do